Before we get started, I want to remind everyone that the information in this presentation is not to be or construed as investment advice. The information presented are subject to change without notice, and while we have made every reasonable effort to ensure that the content is reliable and accurate, we have not independently verified the content and are not responsible for errors therein. Please consult a professional advisor before putting a loonie in any of these financial markets.
Hi everyone, my name is Richard Diaz and welcome back to the IceCap Canadian Market Wrap. Over the last couple of weeks, our focus has been on global events and how they might impact the Canadian economy. This week, we're going to turn our gaze back onto Canada. We're going to review some of the labor market data, trade data, some business sentiment indexes, and provide a quick update on the equity market, as well as interest rate expectations, and finish with a word on our own volatility predictions. So let's start with the labor market data. In December, employment was little changed. 8,200 new jobs were added, but this is, in effect, a rounding error. After a huge surprise in November, which we admittedly were quite skeptical, the labor market is proving quite resilient. Total employment held steady at 60.9%, as you can see from the chart. That's the blue line. This number is quite low historically. This is a legacy of insane immigration policy that imported millions of young people without private sector employment demand to absorb them. On a much more positive note, the participation rate for prime age workers, the economy's most important, continues to increase, and that's the red line. There are three reasons, however, I remain dubious on what is, on the surface, decent labor market data. The first is composition. This chart illustrates the monthly change for December. And as you can see, self-employment accounted for the vast majority of the total employment gains, while private employment fell. Self-employment growth is based on household surveys and self-reporting, making it more sensitive to classification errors, tax, and benefit incentives, and critically, short-term economic pressures. For example, people reporting self-employment when they lose a job but have little actual activity. The sad reality is that Canada is no longer a country of plucky entrepreneurs. You can see that with the red line that has been flat for 2 decades, while public sector employment has soared. So when I see self-employment make up 90% of total employment growth for a month in an era of economic uncertainty, I think it's fair to be skeptical. The second reason is the labor force data, the blue line, remains at odds with the survey of employment payrolls and hours, and that's the red line on the chart before you. There is a difference in methodology, but the quick overview is that the labor force survey is a household survey. They interview a representative sample of individuals and then model out the results. This is a normal practice, whereas the survey of employment payrolls and hours is a business survey based on payroll tax records. The payroll survey is much slower, but much less volatile, and widely seen as the more accurate of the two employment measures. What should be clear from the chart is although sometimes you do get a minor discrepancy between the two, they usually move together. But what we've seen over the last couple of months is that the blue line, the labor force survey, continues to be at odds with the survey of employment payrolls and hours. The third reason is the government bond yield curve. 10 years minus 2 years. The relationship between the yield curve and the unemployment rate is not mechanical, but it is strong because the yield curve embeds expectations about future economic growth, monetary policy, and financial conditions, all of which affect hiring decisions. The unemployment rate is a lagging indicator as firms do not fire workers immediately when conditions worsen. They first freeze hiring, then cut investment, then reduce hours, then delay projects. Only later do layoffs appear in the data. The yield curve, by contrast, is supposed to be forward-looking, although that's not always true. In any event, it moves when investors revise expectations about the economy before those expectations show up in the employment data. Now, of course, it's not perfect, and correlation does not always equal causation, but it is interesting to see the yield curve steepening, and it does suggest that the unemployment rate might rise further. Okay, so that's our view on the labor market. What about trade? This is a clipping from the good people at RBC, and they do great stuff. Canada's trade balance slipped into deficit in October as imports outpaced exports. Exports hit a 7-month high powered by a surge in metals, chemicals, and autos, but this was outweighed by strong gains in electronic, machinery, and metals imports. Energy exports weakened, narrowing the energy surplus, while the trade surplus with the U.S. fell sharply. Right now, any talk of trade, especially with the U.S., is fraud, and that's why I mentioned RBC. If you're curious about what's going on, I would suggest skipping CBC and other media outlets and reading a more dispassionate source, or better yet, going to the actual source of the data. The CBC headline that you see there makes it seem like the U.S. trade is collapsing, whereas the truth is far more nuanced. It has, in fact, stabilized and is trending slightly higher a year after the Americans front-loaded car purchases ahead of tariffs. And add to that much lower crude exports because of falling global crude oil prices and not volume. Indeed, services exports, the majority of which go to the U.S., continue to rise steadily. That's the red line. Switching gears a little bit, the Canadian service sector ended 2025 on weak footing. And you can see that services PMI, though, jumped in December up from November, but is still below the 50 threshold that indicates expansion, signaling that the service sector is contracting in activity and new business for the 13th straight month. New export orders remained particularly weak, and firms cut employment for a fourth successive month amid subdued demand. However, cost pressures stayed high, pushing operating expenses up, and companies raised selling prices for an eighth consecutive month despite demand weaknesses. We're going to talk about inflation in the coming weeks, so just keep this little point in mind. Along with weak services, something that has really caught our attention is car and truck sales. And you can see this is a seasonally adjusted series, but it is rolling over, both for cars, light trucks, and crucially for industry, medium and heavy trucks. This is something really, really keep an eye on. So as we bring it home, we're going to touch quickly on equity markets, then we're going to talk about inflation expectations, and then, of course, our favorite word of the year, volatility. 2025 was an excellent year for equity markets in Canada. Every sector, barring healthcare, was up. Basic materials stood out, soaring on the back of higher gold prices and metal prices. In 2026, we are starting to see more of the same. Basic materials are again crushing it, and we'll discuss this over the next coming weeks for sure. All this brings us to what the BOC may or may not do over the next few months. When the inflation data comes out, we'll go over that and update this chart and our views. But right now, the OIS curve and the government bond market suggest that rate hike cycle is over and mortgage rates are gently edging higher. This will change, though, if things get worse. Finally, as we bring it home, I want to remind you guys of our first episode of the year when we argued that markets were quiet, way too quiet. And we highlighted that volatility was set to spike. We weren't sure of the catalyst, of course, and it's still a long way to go, but we did suggest that viewers pay attention to Iran. And this is because Iran, unlike Venezuela, has a much more sophisticated oil industry and produces 4 million barrels a day. And similar to Iran, it ships the vast majority of its output to China. In the comments section, someone suggested that these Iranian protests happen every couple of years and in due time would fizzle out. And indeed, that person made a very, very good point. That has happened over the last decades. The truth is, no one knows how this is going to play out, and the Ayatollahs are not going to go quietly. But the reason that we feel this time might be different, besides President Trump's willingness to get involved, is because of the collapse of the Iranian currency, the rial. It has lost 90% of its value. This is how revolutions start. Anyway, as I record this, U.S. aircraft are making incursions into Iranian airspace, and a carrier strike group is leaving the Pacific, heading towards the Red Sea. So if it isn't obvious, watch this space, and of course, oil prices and loonie. All right, that's a wrap on this week's episode. Thank you again for watching. Please like, subscribe, and follow for more. And as always, we manage money for families all across Canada and the world, so please feel free to get in touch.